Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight from the Central Florida area, the young 20-something Professor Pixel is joining me here, actually live in the Xtreme Studios just west of Orlando, Florida, because we're covering an early Halloween flick, a Hammer horror film, as it will, called Vampire Lovers, the first in the Karnstein trilogy, which, Professor Pixel, I'm trying to use the G-rated words for the algal purposes and all that, but it's about how do we say this? Exploring the horror mythos with same-sex relationships. Is that adequately stated?
It's about lesbian vampires.
Okay, I was trying to be a little more, have some more couth than you, but being older, I actually care about taste. But you know what? You're right. In this movie, I always loved Hammer horror films. Always pimped them out here on Xtreme Movie Show, or two Extreme Horror Shows, we like to call it. Is this a first watch for you?
Yeah, this is the first watch. I was excited when you told me it was a Hammer horror film, because we've covered plenty on the channel and there's still plenty more to go. But this was a surprising delight. But yeah, how about this was first watch for you too, I imagine?
It's not. I've seen it,
Really?
but it's been like forever. Hammer horror films are always on, it seemed like. And I got to tell you, this movie does Hammer really well. And one of the things I wanted to point out here, because we covered a few of the early Hammer films, like the first Dracula movie, the first Wolfman movie, the first Frankenstein one of the Hammer versions, their own personal adult take of the Universal monsters, as it were, back from the 50s up to now. And this is 1970. So 1970 over in Britain, you had certain sort of standards that you had to follow, and Hammer really tried pushing the boundaries of it. So the link that I had put in there for our viewers to catch on Tubi is actually, I believe, the director's cut, so you get to see what nudity there is, which is big by their standards, pretty tame by today's. But it still has all the Hammer trademarks. It's got fog machines galore. It's got great set pieces. The writing's probably a little thin in this one, but who cares? It's an atmospheric piece, and it holds up well. And while they don't really come to any conclusions about the nature of lesbianism in here, it's interesting to see how it plays out, because at this time, Hammer's kind of like on its last legs in a way. It might have like one little last push in it going into the 70s before it just kind of has a difficult time modernizing what they were doing for a good 20 plus years or so. So while I still have Hammer films, this one's tough, but it's still a very good one. And I'm sure at some point we'll cover the other two. What are some initial takes you have on the film before we dive into the first few scenes?
Initial take. So I wasn't expecting much at first, just from the name, because the name is it feels kind of lazy. However, yeah, it's no blood splatter bride, but as soon as Peter Cushing's name came up, I was like, okay, we've got some class in this film. I see.
Yeah, a lot of the money came from the United States that would go into these movies a little bit to kind of help. So they donate some, and some would come over here. So this movie feels a little bit thin on the budget, but it doesn't really matter. What makes this movie great? It has all the Hammer trademarks. It's very lush. The women are absolutely stunning and gorgeous, and they still hold up today. The interesting thing to me, I thought about it, was how erotic the film is, in that it doesn't show sex straight out. It only hints at it. You see gorgeous, beautiful women in a natural state, charming each other, and you can tell what's going on just by in the first few scenes here, where we have this big dance going on, and Peter Cushing's there only to give star power, because he bows out for about a good 80% of the film. I mean, that's just how it is, let's be honest. But you've got an opening gambit, as it were, and then you've got this big dance, and then the dance, you get like this countess chick who comes in, and she's got a young daughter, and you see everybody kind of just twirling around, and I'm like, okay, I like this. I know it's a small set piece, but it just feels good. You got a dude in a horseback, really bad looking skin, just kind of laughing and key things. So you're like, okay, I don't know who this dude is. Is he going to show up the whole movie or what?
Yes.
But the opening gambit, I think, draws you in, because that's very classic Hammer. When it turns into the ball that's going on here and the general's palace or whatever, it kind of, there's some shots in here that I go, wow, that looks like a 1970s, 80s shots rather than a late 50s kind of Hammer shot. And I don't know if that was very obvious. What did you think?
Yeah, no, I thought with how we started, because we do get a little bit of action first with what's his name? Baron something.
Hartog.
Hard dog. That's right. And he has his little adventure with a beautiful blonde who walks up and then he chops off her head. And going from that to a ball, you think you might you might be shocked to the taste, but no. I loved seeing him just glide around a little bit. It's a wee bit are we wanting to go as we learn throughout the show, the scenes, what we learn, or do we want to just address it full on?
It's a quick review. So, I mean, all I'm going to say is that, at first I thought, okay, this is very by the books Hammer, and it's very thin horror with, the vampire and her shroud, and the shroud was taken or whatever. So the guy thinks he's killed everybody. Stunning, beautiful woman, and like you say, decapitation. So I'm like, okay, this is cool. But in here early on, we're kind of like, okay, what's gonna happen? Because it's some years later, as it turns out.
Yeah. And with the dance of it all, it takes an interesting turn when you consider how Marcilla, Carmilla, whatever you want to call it, how she gets to place. Because here at first, you see this older, still beautiful woman who's like, oh, no, I need to go. My brother is dying. I must leave at once.
It's a honeypot trap.
Huh?
It's a honeypot trap.
Yeah. Do you think you could watch my daughter? Keep her with you? Oh, yes, and my daughter will love having a friend. And we see this. I'm glad that they didn't keep doing it, because they do it with this one, Peter Cushing's daughter. And Peter Cushing's daughter, well, she falls for the typical vampire wiles, and then life drained. And then Miracala, echoing as she's gone. And we see that that woman again, this older woman, crashed this time, her carriage. And, oh no, how's my daughter? Or my niece? She said my niece this time. How's my niece? And she's stunned within the carriage, but we can clearly see it's the same girl.
Yes.
So it's another trap. We never see the aunt again.
Yeah, and it's so again with this man in black, mysterious man in black. I mean, Johnny Cash is supposed to be that, so I don't know where this idea came from. But I want to back up and talk about Ingrid Pitt, who's the actress, who's Marcella, Carmela, and Mercala, all three of them at different points, because obviously, like I said, very stunning women and very nice looking dresses. Basically, it's nightgowns galore, lacy, frilly kind of things, just absolutely incredible. And Hammer Films, they made sure that they got very thin yet shapely women, I will sit there and say. And the movie's so obviously sexual. She's got the red sapphire, or sapphire, I don't remember if it's freaking green. She's got the red jeweled necklace that sits literally in the beginning of the crack of her bosom. And her, you can just tell she's making eyes, and the camera even focuses on her. So you're like, do I got a little hot lesbian action going on here between these two old teenagers here or whatever? And that's what the movie's kind of about. It's about her seducing women because she's looking for somebody to kind of stay with her. So they don't even go into great detail showing her whacking off some of the townspeople and all that too. But it's fun just watching her because you know what she is. And there's no secret to this. She's on screen, yet you're watching her kind of work at everybody in a very seductive way. And by seductive, I don't mean seducing you to have sex with you, but just the way she talks and flirts. Not even that, but she just says the right thing. She's aware of her own charm and beauty of it, and it's kind of funny. And there's this one scene early on where she's got Laura in the room or whatever, and I wanted to bring this up because you and I have talked about this woman before. It's how do I say it? You and I are covering all the James Bond movies in orders, and there's a James Bond film. The first Roger Moore one was Live and Let Die. And in the opening of that movie, you've got James Bond in his house, and he's got a woman in there, and M and Moneypenny come in, and he's like hiding her and all that too. Moneypenny doesn't say anything, and it's where he has the sheer magnetism bit going off, taking her zipper off and all that too. That's the second young woman too. And the interplay between these two is probably I think the heart of the movie. She's played by Madeline Smith. She's got this innocent look in her face, and so uh, was it what is she at this time? Recall it, whatever. She she's basically like, oh, she's basically saying, hey, you look like a little girl. Try on one of my dresses. Go ahead, take your clothes off. And so she does it real innocently and
Yeah.
all that. And they're going back and forth. And yeah, this is again Hammer's way of trying to push the boundaries in a more adult, kind of sexy sort of way. And then they kind of like chase each other in the room and fall down on the bed. And you're like, oh my God. But it actually kind of works because you can see Ingrid is just seducing her, being the person in power there without, forcing herself upon her, as it were.
So,
And it's just a slight seduction. And the one thing about this movie made me go, you and I have talked a little bit briefly before about vampires, how when they're brooding, we don't give a shit about them. That's why no guys go watch Twilight or any of that crap, because it's just a stupid romance, and it may be done okay or whatever, and girls may like it. But I look at this and go, well, I don't know if a woman would like this film, but in a way, you could argue that's a very strong feminist notion of the vampire that Ingrid plays, because she's not doing all the overpowering things that a male vampire does. This vampire is emphasizing the female traits, the seduction, the being classy, the just kind of like floating through the room sort of stuff, and just using the power that people give her by her natural beauty and charm, that you could argue is a very object of femininity. And so to me, that's kind of how I took this movie and really enjoyed it for its erotic undertones, because obviously with the second honeypot situation here, the butler Reston kind of figures out a little bit what's going on, because he goes and he gets the doctor that worked on it. And meanwhile, people are playing, hey, go get the guy from before that was a vampire hunter. And that's the big
but
finale in the third act. But to me, this movie
he
starts
gets it
off the way it
wrong.
does it. I know, but it's still fun to watch, because normally we know the vampire's out there, right? It's Christopher Lee,
Yeah.
and we don't see him for most of the movie till the end, and so it's like a build up. It's the fear of the unknown. Here we know what it is right off the bat, and it's a woman, and she doesn't overpower people and all that. Totally different take on it, but it's something that I thought that this movie does very well, besides looking very good.
Yeah. I mean, I can see partly what you're saying. At the same time, my favorite vampire of all time, Barnabas Collins. He wants to romance his women a little bit too. So he's not Dracula saying, "I'm going to steal your girl."
Right, but this is also roughly around the same time, or during the Dark Shadows, which you're the only person on the planet that's watched all 1,225 episodes, plus the revival. So to me, when I look at both of these, they're both really nailing the gothic part too well. It's just that
Yeah.
Dark Shadows being a TV show, I don't think really was very risque, was it?
No, because it was the '60s to the early '70s. There wasn't much they could do on a soap opera at that point. But what they did have was, of course, Barnabas as a as a romantic figure, like this one, like Carmilla. And what I find interesting about the second honeypot situation is that with the first one, it's easy. It's just let us know, okay, this is what's going on. This is what they're doing. But with the second go around, Carmilla, Miracarla, however you want to call her, she in this one has a girl that is we see her when we first meet her. She's horseback riding. She's wearing the full gear and she's ready to go riding. And then when she goes back, she puts on the dress. And you're right, but that girl sees her as a friend, a dear friend, but a friend throughout all of this as Carmilla is trying to seduce her. And she gets close and the girl doesn't say no, but she'll talk about how, oh, don't you want some handsome young man to come into your life?
That's probably one of the lines of the movie, yeah.
Yeah, and Carmella's like, no, and I hope you don't either, because she's a huge, huge lesbo. And how she ends the movie, I think, is very interesting, because she feasts, and they talk about that while at the end, the third act, we have the men going out to find the tomb inside of the old castle and what's happening at home. Carmilla wants to take the girl, which I can't remember her name. It's not Lauren, but Laura was the first girl. Emma?
Yeah. That's the blonde
Emma.
girl. Yeah, played by Meryl Streep. That's Emma. Emma's the
Second.
innocent-looking one here, and she looks all
Yeah.
innocent.
Well, I don't know. So it's innocent, but it's curious. Like she has these.
It's virginal.
Uh,
It's
but
what it is. She's a young
where
woman looking to do the proper thing in a position in life, and that's to be courted by a man and to be married off, and all that sort of stuff. And like I say, the writing's kind of thin in here, and they
but
don't get into too
she's
much because the movie's not about that. It's about her being at that coming of age sexually type of thing as a virgin, and where's her curiosities lie? Is she being seduced because she's a lesbian, or is seduced because of the power dynamic that's going on with Carmela, played by Ingrid Pitt? I mean, that's
so
really what it comes down to.
I mean, kind of, but at the same time, I was saying that basically throughout the movie, she has not virginal look. She has these mischievous looks, like when she's talking to her teacher. Oh, I'll do my German tomorrow, and she does a glance. It's like, oh yeah, let me get my way, but it's not in a bratty way.
I'm coming.
But anyway,
sexual powers on you way.
Anyway, what I found curious was where you have Carmela wanting to feast upon the teacher, Mademoiselle Prescott or whatever her name was, and the butler. The men say once she's feasted, she's going to need to rest for some time, and that's what she does. But she tries to take Emma with her. So I'm not saying that for sure they're trying to say that Carmilla in this instant actually cared about her target, but it's a weird move because she wanted her to come. She didn't want
to seduce her and overwhelm her. She wanted to come to her freely, and that's the ultimate seduction, is that you don't force somebody, you don't compel them to do that. They come to you at their own accord. And so I think she was wanting that kind of like lifelong type of companion, but she wanted it willingly.
Yep.
And so when the talk of the other guy comes in, it's not because she's jealous of it, it's because she realizes a distinction to it. But what does she do? She seduces her in the sense of, she goes, okay, hey, no, I understand about this guy, but it's only because I really care about you. You're awesome to me, or like that. And then they, hug or whatever. And it's like, it feels legit, not like she's playing her. And so I thought that was, again, the whole thing is good. And then Renton, who comes in, he's like this older guy, and he's not a jerk or anything like that, but the doctor's like, hey, you can only do whatever in the house while I go get the doctor. And so Renton's kind of like in charge. He's like, no, I've got a really big responsibility. And he starts to figure out that it might be a vampire because of where they're at, because the locals are dying off, and the locals on the bar are like, hey, bro, we don't joke about that crap here. If you got garlic flowers, go ahead and use them. And so he gets in there, and he's, of course, surrounded by, he's the only man surrounded by a bunch of beautiful women. And then, of course, Mademoiselle Peridot, the teacher, she's stunning, but she's a little older. She gets seduced, and you're like, oh my goodness. So he's kind of like by himself in a room full of women that are getting seduced, and it turns out he gets seduced. And what I liked about this scene here is when Carmela goes to seduce him, it's not like, let me grab your crotch, let me throw you into bed, or anything that might be like a modern movie. She just kind of basically just looks at him and makes him feel like a man because of the way she talks to him a lot. And I gotta be honest with you, when they kiss, they're throwing down lip lock, and it's like, holy, going out. You can look at the guy's face, and you can tell he's going, holy crap, I'm not going to score like this ever again. I'm going to go for it. And he does. I give him credit, because you feel him going, she's way above my level, bro. I'm going to go ahead and go for the home run. And then, of course, he basically gets whacked. But Brent wasn't the asshole guy you're saying, man, I can't wait till he dies. No, we're not rooting for her. We're simply watching Carmela and how she acts now. She just kind of slithers through each scene.
Yeah, I also wanted to say that what his real complaint is his boss, which is the Mademoiselle, who's played by Kate O'Mara, which played the Ronnie in Doctor Who, which is something to me. But she gets kind of witchy, kind of bitchy towards him because she's been seduced by the vampire and is under her thrall. And so she says, no, don't send for the doctor. You will do as I say. And so this guy, the butler, and he's kind of a smarmy butler, but we don't despise him. He gets it so wrong because of that one line. She's like a vampire, he jokes, because she was a bitch.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so he's convinced she's the vampire compared to the strange young girl that only appeared a few days ago. So that was kind of silly, but yeah, no, I do like a lot of this movie. You're right. It is rather thin through it. We never get an explanation for who the mysterious man in black who's just following along laughing just randomly. Like,
yeah, on horseback.
So I thought it was going to be implied that he was running things, but actually no. So it a lot, it does leave some to be desired, something to be desired, just like Carmilla was desiring that young girl. But it was fun. It was really good. Like I think it's solid. The performances off the charts, especially even though Cushing's in it for just such a little time. At the end, I'll do it. He's praying his daughter is alive, but my Laura is gone. There's power. I love it. And
Yeah,
I do have to say,
Wars, I'm used to him being the heavy, not being a supplicant like he is in Star Wars. It was very weird to me as a kid. I already kind of knew who he was. So, but you're right. He does have a strong presence, especially in these types of films.
And so does the I can't remember his name, Bartog. Trying to find the full name because
Douglas Wilmer.
No, not his real name. No, the full name of Bartog. Something Bartog.
It's Baron von Hartog. So the Baron.
Baron von.
Yeah, that Baron guy played in one of the first. You and I've talked about reviewing the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes on the Granada TV from the 80s to 90s, but he played in the 60s version, so he was a name. He's a very strong guy too. Just put a pipe in his mouth and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, he's great in this. That was my point. He in this movie, he has power too. He has even less time than Cushing. Yeah. And he's able to, you feel like he understands. He's explaining the backstory as he's explaining, well, we killed my sister, so I knew I had to come in here and rat each one out. There's just such strength in the supporting cast. And yeah, you're right, Verity. It is a very sapphic film. But it's really great, I think. It could be better. It could be better. It's a solid film.
Yeah, and the thing about it too is I don't know if it was originally set up as a trilogy. Obviously, they made one. I think the key thing to hear is that the book that it's based off of goes back, I think, a few hundred years before it or something, back when the idea of what would become vampires in Bram Stoker's mind. So there's definitely a little bit of what they call it, Sapphos, the female sexual energy thing, the sapphic type of thing to this, or whatever, lesbian angle, as you would say early on. I was trying to be nice about it. And so I thought they did a good job of it because, again, we talked about recently here on Xtreme Movie Show, The Last Voyage of the Demeanor, which is completely bombed with no support or anything like that in the theaters. But I thought it was a very good film and done well. It was a bit of a different take on what you see as a vampire as we know it in the Cure. So it's, the tale of going across the water, going to London, and regardless of how much it might have been moviefied with the sequel being set up and all that, I thought it was done well. And much the same way, this is done very well. Obviously, it gives you a lot of beautiful women to stare at for the majority of the screen. They do that very well. It's essential to the story because it's a very feminine film. It's not, I don't think women here are being objectified. They're the ones that run everything, and everything happens around them, and the guys are trying to figure out what's going on. And so, I would argue it's a very pro-feminist type movie in that regard, and done in a way that's, visually stunning, like typical horror films. But again, like I said, a bit thin on the writing because we don't know how this all happened. We just know that it is what it is, and then we get set up with an action sequence like out of a James Bond film, and then of course it's set up for the trilogy because at the end we see, the mysterious man in black on horseback kind of laugh. It's like, okay, bro, you showed up like 3 or 4 times laughing or whatever, and what's going on? And you have this Karnstein family and this castle that has been referenced several times where they have stuff, so there's some history there. So it's like, okay, be interested in seeing the the second one and third one too, and see how Hammer tried to modernize it a little bit. When I say modernize it, it's more of the sexual themes they put in, or not necessarily making it 1970s at the time, although they definitely did it. When we get to talking about Christopher Lee and the disco, you're going to know exactly what I mean. So we'll leave it at that. But we're going to call it here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting ready to go live with another stream right after this here too, but we wanted to pop in with a Hammer early preview of what we're going to be covering over here for the Halloween season 2023 on the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. I want to say thank you all for listening, getting the word out about us, and of course for Professor Pixel showing up tonight so we could review The Vampire Lovers, a Hammer horror film. Go check it out. If you like Hammer or just intrigued by it or want a little bit of a different take, this is your film. Yeah, so Verity's in chat talking about seeing it. Sapphic, that's the word. Yep. The women are all gorgeous and Verity. The one thing I would say too that I didn't want to get a big discussion tonight, we will later, is that when you have the vampires from the 90s, you guys don't want to see it because they're wuss asses. Whereas here, I don't know if women don't want to see it because they're, you know, all hot and pretty, and guys would be like, yeah, I'd watch a movie like this. I'm interested to see what movies vampire wise are out there that men and women both would like and not feel like it's a letdown or whatever. So you never act like that with my friends. Yeah, but I think it's more of the girly high school thing, kind of innocent. But yeah, you're right. Anything Hammers, it's going to be worth watching. Absolutely. All right, guys, have a good night. Remember, stay tuned.